Good afternoon and welcome to the City Council meeting for the City of International Falls for Monday, October the 1st, 2018. I would ask all please to stand and pledge allegiance to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I would ask the City Administrator to note the roll call with all members of the Council present. Move to the agenda, and we have several additions to the agenda. Under new business, item number 2 is to approve an application for the exempt permit for the Rainier Recreation Club to conduct a tip board on October 12th through the 14th at the Elks Lodge. Item number 3 under new business is to approve application for exempt permit for the Rainier Rec Club to conduct a raffle on October 27th at the Elks Lodge. And item number 12 is to approve the 2019 group renewal and rate information for the Blue Cross Blue Shield. And then item number 13 is to consent to the Mayor's appointment of Joe Kraus to the Legislation and Land Use Committee of the City Council. Council's pleasure with the agenda and the additions. Motion by Councillor Briggs to adopt the agenda with the additions. Second by Councillor Jacksaw. Discussion on the motion or the agenda. Hearing none, question.
Aye.
I vote yes, motion is carried. Agenda is approved with the additions. Thank you. Move to the minutes, and we have 2 sets of minutes to approve. The first is for the regular meeting of the City Council on September the 17th, 2018. Council's pleasure.
Move.
Motion by Councillor Briggs to approve those minutes. Second by Councillor Jacksaw. Discussion on the motion or the minutes. Hearing none, question.
Aye.
And I'll vote yes. Motion is carried. Minutes are approved for the regular council meeting. And then we have the special meeting to adopt the preliminary budget and levy, and that was on September 26th. And your pleasure with those minutes. Motion by Councillor Kraus.
I'll second.
Second by Councillor Droba. Discussion on those minutes or the motion. Hearing none, question.
Aye.
I'll vote yes. Motion is carried. The minutes for the special meeting are approved. Thank you. Move to the resolution approving transfers and payment of claims. We have one transfer, and that's to the general fund from the lodging and tax fund of $806.30. Under accounts payable claims, the City of International Falls regular claims total $164,479.57. Airport Commission claims of $157,709.35, and Airport Commission Terminal Project Phase 2 claims of $464,404.96. Council's pleasure with the resolution approving the transfers and the payment of claims. Motion by Councillor Jacksaw to adopt the resolution.
Second.
Second by Councillor Briggs. Discussion on the resolution, the transfers, or the claims. Hearing none, question.
Aye.
I would vote yes. Motion is carried. Resolution is approved, approving the transfers and the payment of claims. Thank you. At this time, anyone in the audience that wishes to bring something to the attention of the council that is not on the agenda, that they are not on the agenda for? State your name and address.
Gary Graham, 1308.
You want to come up and be at the microphone so everyone can hear well?
Bringing forward something that me as a citizen of International Falls, I've been a citizen for 67 years here in International Falls, and the issue of blight that continues in our city. I want to, and I'm not here to be just a complainer. I want to be part of a solution that we can all work together to try to resolve. The city, I'm sure, is quite aware of all the blight that's happening in the International Falls, and we'd like to see something done with it. And I'd like to ask, I guess, the City Council or Adam, how many actual commercial buildings are considered in the blight at this time?
Chief, do you want to come forth, and maybe Kelly, both of you would want to come forth and outline what commercial commercial structures. I guess the question is, what commercial structures are considered blight at this time?
Do the ones that we're actually working on, I guess, opposed to the ones that aren't being worked.
Stock tire.
Stock tire is the other one, yes. I would say the
I've got those on my list already. How many private properties in the city presently are the city mowing and assessing for property owners?
Throughout the year, we've written 130 violations. I believe around 40 of them were followed up on maintenance, either cleanup, lawn mowing, whatnot, where we had to hire a contractor.
And what effect have we had on those? Bidding those people? I mean, I would imagine it's bidding, those costs are being put towards their property taxes, and so what effect have we had on those?
Is the question return, like the same people?
As the same people over and over again, and, you know, are we having any effect on them making any improvements on those properties so that the city is not having to do that?
I would say most yes, a small number no. So of the 40 people we have that we've had to mow grass for, or clean up, what we deal with is initially in the beginning of the year, June for example, we assess a lot of lawn mows. You get the foreclosures, the foreclosure companies, some people that just haven't been on board yet, so to speak, one time of mowing and they get on board. You have some repeat customers that you hit or that get assessed every, 3-4 times in the summer that do not change or do not remedy their situation. Of the, again, 130 that were written up this summer, 40 of them being sent to cleanups and whatnot.
Is one of those at 920 3rd Street?
I don't know.
You don't know that. It's right there on the same block as the No Place Like Home Again. And I mentioned the name of the person who owns the home. Would that help?
I don't believe so.
Okay, that's been that way all summer. It's on our main corridor coming into the city on 3rd Street. And he's presently is not living in the International Falls. And the property looks just horrible.
Is it being rented, or no, there's no one living there?
I don't believe so. After reading through the ordinance that the city presently has, there sure is not much teeth into it, and is there any way that we can possibly put more teeth into that ordinance, that we can make like commercial people more liable for their properties that are presently being just left?
First of all, maybe to go to the ordinance, you'd have to look in the ordinance in 3 different places, because blight is covered in 3 different areas, so it's not just one. And there is penalties if the city cares to invoke those on properties. We try to, first of all, warn, encourage, try to work with the property owners, and understanding that a person's property and their home is their castle. You certainly try to work with them, but you're correct in that in some cases blight continues and we don't get their attention. I know the chief and I have been to several properties in the city several times and still haven't remedied totally clean up of blight.
I mean, I know legally, a person owns a property and you just cannot just go take it from them. And I would imagine they would have to be forfeited on their taxes, and eventually would go back to the Coochin County on their rolls as far as, not being able to collect any taxes. Legally, do we have any right to push this any further in ordinances, or?
And in the ordinance, in one place, I know that the city could place a $150 fine on a property. And in some cases, folks are struggling financially, and do you want to take and penalize them? You just try to get folks to change their habit and their culture of dealing with their property. In some cases, I believe we have 5 that are right now, they have been notified by the city attorney, and we are waiting to take them to court. And I believe on the agenda tonight we have another one to add to that. So we are...
What is $150 to a corporation?
Well, maybe to a corporation it isn't much, but to some individuals it's a great deal.
Exactly, Bob. I mean, like the ICO building, I would imagine they've been fined over and over again and just keep paying the fines.
Well, they haven't been fined. We've been encouraging them. And Kelly, I don't know how many times you have contacted the owners of that structure. And has sent them papers that the city is willing to participate with them in taking the structure down. I'm not sure what the status of that building is right now.
Probably they still have the intentions on repairing the building, which we have to give them a timeline to do it on. And if timeline, then we would have to go to the legal recourse at that. Have to do a timeline of repairs for them, and
Set that timeline, or?
we can set the timeline with a I believe, I have to look, Gary, to be honest with you, I believe the maximum is 90 days, and there is a timeline that we do set. We do have statute that allows us only a certain timeline.
What's our recourse if they do not respond in that certain time?
Then we would go through the legal recourse. Just the problem with giving them the timeline, Gary, is, to be honest with you, is timeline of things, you basically have to list all the repairs that you see necessary. So when you do all the repairs that are necessary, that they're going to do those repairs. To answer your question as far as the ICO, which I'm very familiar with, I tried to work with them, to be totally honest with you. Tried to work with them. Tried to get resolution from them to have them make the decision, because it does make a tough decision in a lot of ways. Is I believe with you, I believe it's a bad building. I mean, there's 2 different say a hazardous structure, a blighted building, or a non-repairable building. I mean, you kind of get two different phases, I guess. And it fits both of them, in all honesty. But as far as the repairs go, we'd have to have a timeline. If we did go, we would have to say they needed to fix this. To detail it sometimes, especially when you can't get inside of it. You need their.
I mean, just driving into town, some of these places are just an embarrassment.
I don't disagree with you.
We have lots of tourists, and we try to promote our area every year to have people come here, but when you see things like that, burnt out buildings and so on, I mean, what kind of impression do people have on our community? And me as a citizen, I'd like to improve that impression on our city and see if we can't do more to make that a better impression.
Well, the city council certainly agrees with that. You do have to give those owners a reasonable amount of time to work with their insurance companies and know that that can take some time. And then once that's concluded, then we can start urging them to either make repairs or take the building down, whichever seems to make the most sense to them. So,
How many years has ICO been out of business?
have taken and removed
They're
the,
gone, yes.
yeah, they've taken the tanks out of the ground about 3 or 4 years ago.
I just want to add one thing. We actually were talking at our last council meeting about strengthening our ordinance on fire or hazardous material. We right now don't have anything that gives a timeline on when a business has to be torn down or a building has to be torn down once a fire has been assessed that it's not replaceable. And I think that was one of the things that Councillor Briggs and I were going to look at bringing to the land use and legislation. And now tonight, Councillor Kraus is going to be put on that committee, so that can be something that we look forward to working with. The problem is, and I think you hit it on the head, our ordinances are very, very weak. We don't have set timelines. We have wording in our ordinances that say a reasonable amount of time. Well, that gives a lot of leeway of what a reasonable amount of time is. Is that 3 days? Is that 30 days? Is that 2 years? I mean, we need to break it down to what a reasonable timeline is. Is that 7 days? I think it might be. But we need to have those discussions so that we have much more teeth into our ordinances rather than these vague understandings. And I think the city attorney agrees with that too. That was something that we had discussed. Having a definite timeline would make more sense to fighting our ordinances or fighting our blight in our community. So
Maybe I could call on the city administrator. Ken, could you outline the fact that we have some proposed ordinances that we are working on at the present time, probably a complete rewrite of many of those ordinances?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, Council. City Council has had blight as a high priority for a number of years, actually. And one of the things that, Mayor, you had referenced 3 provisions of the city charter, or the city code of ordinances rather, chapters 4, 6, and 10 have elements related to blight. Some are related specifically to housing, some are just general provisions. And so what the council and what we're looking at is consolidating into one chapter the licensing ordinance and also a property maintenance code. And as part of that property maintenance code, there'd be specific timelines, perhaps referenced in terms of when people who have violations need to perform. And so all that's going to be consolidated into one ordinance. And so we've been working on that. And it is not just an issue here for the city of International. We've had a couple meetings over the course of the last month and a half. The city has initiated through a resolution asking that adjacent jurisdictions, including the city of International Falls, Coochin County, and the other cities in the county to try and work together to have kind of a concerted effort at addressing blight, because blight does not exist in the city of International Falls. No jurisdictional boundaries. With all the other communities in the county have the same. And have a more or less united front through adoption of the property maintenance code, so that we can address this on a more proactive basis. So I just want to underscore that I know that the city council has blight as a very high priority, and staff has been working to try and work through the fire department, the police department, and our building and zoning. But as you pointed out, property rights, and we have to allow an ample opportunity for people to non-compliant issues they have on it. I would say, fair to say that none of us are satisfied with the progress that we've made and will continue to make. Cleaning up and consolidating the ordinance and then moving forward.
Ken, have we looked into other cities, what they're doing with their blight, what their ordinances are?
Actually, Mr. Mayor, reviewing this, I had worked previously in the city of Heights. Columbia Heights is an inner-ring suburb, has blight issues as well as we do. They have a lot of small lot sizes similar to we do. A lot of them were platted pre-World War II. And the city of Columbia Heights has been proactively working, because it's an inner-ring housing stock and older commercial base, trying to address those issues. So we're actually looking at using their ordinance as a model for our local ordinance, as well as incorporating some of the other things that we need to have in our existing ordinance in there. We can address these issues. And I know when I was there, their ordinance had, all three occasions, the city prevailed. And refused to comply with the orders that they had on their property. They took it to court, and all three of those decisions were in favor of the city. I want to use that one because we know it's been tested in court. We don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Any more?
Well, and Gary, I just would say, I know the ICO building has been vacant for a fair amount of time, but we have other structures in the city that have been vacant for years, some on Main Street and other places. And, should we move to take every vacant building down, or what should we be doing there? And I guess we're certainly open to advice, and we want to see things cleaned up, and I think are moving, proactively, at the same time trying to not put anybody down.
As long as they're not, creating a safety issue or a health issue, I don't know what more we can do with them.
Well, and certainly if they're a health hazard, or if they're attracting vermin, we will move much more quickly on those.
The condemnation option on those health issues, which we do. I'm just curious, because you brought up the subject of the ICO. So have we haven't set a timeline for ICO yet?
No, they didn't have a timeline. They were actually working with us very
How long ago?
back off. We started with them in July, I think it was.
July?
When we first started, yeah.
And we've had nothing moved there since July?
Nothing moved after that. They looked into the demolition process. That was the start of it. They were working. A lot of different things that just can't go to normal. Whether it fit into our program with the city or if a commercial contractor did it, they still have to remove.
August, September, they haven't come to a conclusion about that piece.
Well, last I spoke with them was, they showed interest in it. Back to her soon because I needed to know. hey, if you're gonna do the repair,
You're recommending that we do give them a timeline?
I think that'd probably be the best way to handle it, because at least then they can make the decision to say, hey, we're gonna fix it, and we know we have to do it in this, say, 60 days. After that point, then unfortunately, if they, you're asking for some,
On that one specific property, anyway.
Yes.
You have heard now that we're going to institute a timeline
we can take care
soon,
of that.
like before the end of
We
October.
can do it by the end of the week.
End of the week, okay.
I realize that, it all takes time. I mean, if we just can solve one at a time, it's a step forward for our city.
Certainly appreciate your caring about the city and your effort to come here on a rainy night and talk to us about it. You're most welcome. I'm glad you're here. So,
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
I think Nancy had a question.
Pardon me?
Nancy.
Oh, Nancy next. Thank you.
Hi, Nancy.
Want to come up, Nancy?
Live in Little Fork, but I have a business on Main Street in International Falls. It's regarding this same topic.
Okay.
And I just wondering if the counselors realize how us residents, how strongly we feel about this. There's been a lot of talk about it lately, and I'm not so much, I'm mostly concerned with the main corridors into the town, both directions. Things aren't looking so good. Highway 53 looks pretty bad entering. There was a feed on Facebook, and I know how you guys love Facebook, but this just really hit close to home. It was taken out of a travel book, and it's not from me, it's another reader, and she said that it was the best sights to see in all 50 states. And it talks about Voyageurs National Park. And this says here, and I'm going to have to take these off, International Falls, the only sizable nearby community, might sound attractive, but it's a messy array of motels, duty-free shops, fast food joints, and lumber yards. The falls never more than glorified rapids anyway, were dammed in 1906, the rapids. But that's not the impression that we want potential businesses, people to move into our area. But I do feel it's sort of accurate when you're coming in on those, not so much this one other than ICO, and I know there's I think a plan for Highway 53.
Yes.
And when is that?
That would be the summer of 2020. The process right now is that they're working on a design for that. There has been a visual quality committee that has been working with the Minnesota Department of Transportation and two engineering firms, I believe, that are working on both the engineering for the design of the street and then also the visual quality. And so that would be bids would be let in the fall of 2019, so about a year from now, and then construction would be scheduled for 2020, the summer of 2020, and of course keeping the corridor open during that time with major construction is going to be a challenge. They may have to do half one side and half the other. We're not sure how the engineering or the contractor are going to do that.
Right. Well, and I would like to ask or propose that next summer, in 2019, or as soon as possible, there's things along that corridor that we could do without waiting. I have some questions. I also feel, unlike Gary, I do feel that this ordinance that I've read actually does have some pretty good teeth. There are timelines set in here. Grass over 6 inches tall, I think that's 10 days, that sort of thing. I have another question as to junk automobiles. It says that is an automobile which is not currently licensed for use upon the highways. And I don't want to be here to point fingers at specific places and spots, but they're kind of obvious. It's seeming like we have a whole bunch of pop-up used car lots lately. The one on the highway there, I think it's adjacent to the veterinary clinic, and I don't know if that's his property. There's a whole bunch of campers and boats and cars that it looks terrible that they're just there for sale with for sale signs on. And so I don't know if that's something you can enforce. I don't know. I mean, those are the kind of things that I think we just need to strongly discourage business owners. You know, I don't know if they're currently licensed. Maybe somebody could check into that. Maybe that, I mean, how do you guys feel about that, to have those cars? I mean, I understand when it's your home and it's your driveway and you're selling your car, but is there some recourse there? Can you do anything to not allow that to happen?
Businesses have to have licenses to operate, so we do have some recourse to control that.
Have you guys seen that? Do you know what
The
I'm
vehicles
talking
are licensed, though it takes away a great deal of discretion on the part of the city to go after them. So if they're for sale and they've got an up-to-date license, now the property that you're speaking of, I believe, is zoned commercially, and the owner of the property allows them to place it there and is not receiving anything, my understanding. I've talked to him, and is not receiving anything from those folks for putting their vehicle there. It doesn't look great, but I'm not sure what recourse we would have at this point. I would want to confer with the city attorney about that one, and
I'm not, they have a great business, you know, and their improvement on the building looks wonderful right now.
Well, it's not owned by the
It's
veterinary
not
clinic.
owned by them?
No,
Okay.
no, it's another
Someone
property
told me
owner.
it was, so I wasn't sure, okay. But, you know, that's an example of coming into the town not looking so great for a visitor or a potential business person, whatever. You know, there's things like that. There's things like in front of the America Inn. Okay, I've never seen a place in town where you let the grass grow all summer so someone can bale hay there. It's like, that's 6 inches, it's 10 days, 7 days. I don't know why that's allowed. I just think there's things that should be dealt with that are very, very visible, very visible.
To follow up on that, why is that happening? If we allow that grass to, that open field there, we could graze horses there.
The only thing I could answer on that is they claim it to be egg property that is used.
Ag property?
Yeah, and it's not zoned ag because we don't have.
Maybe next summer that could be dealt with. So, I mean, you know, on that corridor, I think it's basically that ICO, and that to me always stands out in my mind when the grass is this tall and then eventually they bale it. But otherwise, I think that corridor is very pretty coming into town. You know, the trees coming closer to town and whatnot. I guess I have more issues with the Highway 53 than, you know, I do that. There was one other thing. The other thing that I notice, and, you know, I just kind of hate to wait till 2020, but it would be taken care of then because there's going to be construction. But I just kind of have been driving down, taking a look, and even the curb and gutter, there's so many weeds growing up, you know, where the curb meets the sidewalk and stuff like that. Now, I don't know that that's the property owners or if it's the city, but can we weed whip? Can we spray some stuff so that doesn't look so bad? You know, I don't know, I would just encourage all of you to really look when you drive down that highway on both sides, and there's some real obvious things. I hate, like I say, I don't want to point fingers, but the lumber yard, it's the property across from the business there. Maybe they need to put a fence around it. If it's going to be like that. But that's something, you know, I hate to be the one to say it, but everybody talks about it. So I just would like to see us starting soon. It's going to be winter, so we've kind of missed the time frame here. But before 2020, I think there's still many simple things that actually do have some teeth in this. There's some teeth in this ordinance to enforce a few things. There are time frames. There's a 30-day one here. There's a 10-day. There's, you know, 6 inches of grass. So there are some things that can be enforced.
And they are in most places.
And,
There are a few
yeah.
that we aren't.
And I know that these guys work hard, like, you know, I don't see the real residential part of the city that much, and I know there's lots of residential buildings and apartment buildings and homes that they're making, I'm sure, plenty visits to and whatnot, and I understand that. My main concern, my issue is the corridors into the town, and it be looking more attractive to potential visitors and potential business people.
Just our local pride in ourselves.
Absolutely, absolutely.
The issue of that lumber yard on Highway 53, is there any recourse the city has with that? Because it's been sitting like that for years now. Is there anything we can do about that?
Well, they're using it for storage, and at times does look messy. At the time they kind of clean it up, but it's primarily a storage yard. Would it look better with a fence around it? Possibly.
Something needs to be done. It's just, I mean, when it's kind of mentioned in a book that's written about the park, and that, obviously that wasn't a specific name, but that writer noticed lumber yards, and, you know, so it's, you know, and it's like, I don't mean like petty little things. There's just some big things that I think would make a huge difference if we could just focus on, and even just talking with these people and asking them, please, you know, I put a window box in the back of my apartment building just so it would look nice going through the alley. Just little things that, just to have some pride in both your own property and your city. I think if we could somehow get something going where it was an issue where people actually got excited or wanted to do these things that are very expensive and, you know, that take a lot of time and labor and stuff. I understand not everybody can take care of all of that stuff right away, but there's a few little things that just, if everybody did some little things, whether it's a little paint or mowing the boulevard in front of your place, or you know, if the city can help with the kids in the summer to weed whip or spray weed killer and stuff like that. I think we just all need to make a more conscientious effort to give a better impression.
I think you're in the right, going in the right direction. We certainly all need to do our part.
And I'm willing to help out with
and
that.
that's what really, I think, is the first step in economic development. Everybody doing their part to make their city look good, make it inviting.
Yeah. And it's just seeming to me and to many others that it's just little by little getting a little worse all the time. And that's why I'm here, and Gary, it's like, we got to stop this right now. You know,
Change
the direction. Yes, let's, whatever you guys need to do to have set actual time frames and then enforce them. But like I say, I did see a few time frames in here. But, you know, if there's more that you feel you need to do or whatever, I'm just asking you, let's do it then, whatever we can do.
Great, thank you.
That's it.
I've thought that communication is important in this regard. We don't see enough citizens enough times here. And would it be helpful if we had our plan for blight removal posted on our city website so that at least we're giving you hope that we are working on some of this? We mentioned 5 that commercial structures that we're working on.
That's
You
good.
didn't know
Yeah.
that, right?
Right, and I didn't know that before either. So
What?
stuff that's pending in court are residential.
Oh, resident, but
And it's the
Yeah.
residential that's gotten the primary focus. I mean, there's a ton of work being done and a lot of efforts, but the primary efforts have been directed towards residential up until now. And the commercial, there's one that we're in the process of working on now, trying to get a new owner in there to fix it and
Commercial are probably more visible to the average citizen, so I guess I would ask a little bit more of an effort to be placed on those if there's things that can be done. I don't, even if it's a letter, just encourage them.
I think it's important that our constituents are aware of our efforts as well, and that we
Yes.
have a dialogue opening up. Because frankly, the concern that you have about the weeds along the curb, I have not noticed that.
Yeah.
I'll have to go look
Yeah.
at that. My guess would be that would be a city responsibility where the curb meets the city street. I'm just thinking it would be.
Yeah.
But that would be something maybe the city could take action.
I don't notice it so much like downtown on the main street as on that there doesn't seem to be grass and weeds growing up there, but I did notice it. And I probably didn't notice it other than probably that ICO where there's lots of weeds and stuff growing up, but
In some cities, they have on their website, they have like report a pothole kind of thing, where you have communication going on about what's happening in the city streets. The citizens are able to post that there's a pothole on so-and-so street that's bad and needs fixing. That would, I think that would help our process here, and also show that we are very serious at the council, each one of us, about the blight. Some of those problems seem intractable to me in my tenure here. We haven't really made many moves on some of the properties you've mentioned. And I'm hoping that, hoping isn't going to help, though. We need to have a plan, and
I wonder if there would be some sort of, on a website or the city, something where you could, but it might just turn into just a complaint thing, but where a person could identify certain things, and maybe then one of you could take a look or whatever, because you don't see everything every day of the week. None of us do. I think it's just because this has been such a topic of conversation that now people are starting to notice more things all the time, but maybe, because I think some of it is big things that do take time and take money, but then some of it to me are little things. It's like the same when you're fixing up your home. It's like some jobs are really big, but some are a couple tiny little things and you have a whole new impression of your living room, or so I think there's a little bit more that we can all as a community do.
appreciate that
I
spirit.
won't take any more of your time. Thank you.
I will
you.
follow up with the council on the website idea. I don't know how warmly embraced that.
I've been talking about it for 4 years.
Oh, you have? Okay. Well, I don't know why we don't have it, but we
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Chief and Kelly. Anyone else in the audience that's not on the agenda that wishes to address the council? If not, there's another opportunity at the conclusion of the meeting for that to occur. If not, we'll move to the first reading of the ordinance of the fifth series, amending the Code of Ordinances, Section 9-20, on calendar parking, which amends the time of change hours. Council's pleasure with that first reading. Is it the first reading?
I thought it was the second reading.
Mayor,
Please.
to talk about this at the last meeting, my understanding is that we're setting the first reading for this meeting because we have the actual text as part of it in ordinance form. So my perception is that this is a first reading, the second reading will be at which time it can be published immediately.
And the change would be presently under the calendar parking, you're allowed to park from 8 until midnight, 8 p.m. until midnight as an hour of change, or the hours of change, so that we will not do any ticketing of calendar parking during those hours. Those are being extended to 6 p.m. to midnight, and hopefully that's helpful to citizens and making calendar parking work in the community. With that, again, your pleasure with the first reading of the ordinance to change the hours.
So moved.
Motion by Councillor Droba,
Second.
second by Councillor Jacksaw. Discussion on the motion or the ordinance? Hearing none, question.
Aye.
Aye.
I would vote yes. Motion is carried. The first reading of that ordinance change is approved. Thank you. Move to the consent agenda, and item number 1 is to authorize travel and expenses for employee Brad Hagan to attend the Minnesota Fall Maintenance Equipment Expo in St. Cloud, October 3rd and 4th.
Move.
Motion by Councillor Jacksaw. Second. Second by Councillor Kraus. Question.
Aye.
Aye.
I'll vote yes. Motion is carried. Consent agenda approved. Thank you. Move to new business, and item number 1 under new business is a resolution approving the application for an exempt permit for the Bronco Hockey Boosters to conduct a raffle on January 5, 2019 at Bronco Arena. Motion by Councillor Kraus.
Second.
Adopt the resolution. Second by Councillor Briggs. Discussion on the motion or the resolution? Hearing none, question.
Aye.
Aye.
I would vote yes. Motion is carried. Resolution adopted, and the exempt permit is approved. Thank you. Item number 2 is also a resolution approving an application for an exempt permit from the Rainier Recreation Club to conduct tip boards on August 12 and 14 at the Elks Lodge. Your pleasure with that resolution.
Move.
Motion by Councillor Briggs to adopt the resolution.
Second.
Second by Councillor Kraus. Discussion.
I just have a question. How many permits have they gotten this year? There's a certain amount you can have in a calendar year before you have to file for on-site gambling license, and I think they have to be dangerously close to that number. And their year started in July.
Mr. Mayor.
City Administrator, please.
I believe it's 12 events that's triggered, and my recollection is that this would be the
They had
a dozen.
they had the corn feed raffle that they did. Then they had 2 nights that they did tip boards. There was something else. I mean, I'm all for it, but they have a calendar year to use it, and here's another 2 of them on this agenda. So I just,
So it just started in July, and we've had 5 now with these 2?
Well, wait, I think, are you speaking to the Elks Lodge, or are you speaking to the Rainier Rec Club? They're conducting the tip board at the Elks Lodge, but it's the Rainier Rec Club.
the Rainier Rec Club.
Okay,
But if you do a certain amount at one facility, you have to apply for a residency license for that facility.
So in other words, if the Elks Club allows the gambling for other entities, that is counted on that one site, the Elks Club?
Rainier Rec Club can only have a certain amount of activities at one site without getting a permanent license. That's my only point. I have no issue with them doing it. It's just I want to be clear moving forward that they're getting close. I thought they were closer to that number than they were.
Okay, I guess it's a good thing to be aware of. I don't know if that's good to have it on our radar as we administrate this.
No problem.
Mr. Mayor.
Please.
Just for clarification, on the second page of the application, it indicates that under gambling activity, 12 off-site events are allowed each calendar year, not to exceed a total of 30. They haven't exceeded that. Our staff is aware of that.
Okay, not a problem.
And just to be sure, I know you're knowledgeable on this because of your activities with the Veterans of Foreign Wars post, but So does the Elks also have a limitation as to how many can be conducted there? It's just the club that's doing the...
Correct.
Okay. All right. Further discussion on that resolution or questions with regard to the application of the Rainier Rec Club to conduct tip boards, October the 12th through the 14th at the Elks Lodge. Hearing none, question?
Aye.
I would vote yes. Resolution is, motion is carried and resolution is adopted approving the exempt permit for the Rainier Rec Club. Item number 3 is also with the Rainier Rec Club, and they're asking for approval of an application for an exempt permit to conduct a raffle on October 27, 2018 at the Elks Lodge. Motion by Councillor Jacksaw to adopt the resolution. Second by Councillor Kraus. Discussion on that resolution or motion. Chair would then call the question.
Aye.
And I would vote yes. Motion is carried, the resolution is adopted, and the exempt permit is approved. Thank you. Item number 4 is to authorize the city attorney to proceed with blight enforcement against Larry Nichols for property at 2106 3rd Avenue West, parcel number 92-111-06010. Council's pleasure with that request for authorization.
So moved.
Motion by Councillor Jacksaw.
Second.
Second by Councillor Briggs. City Attorney, you're working with the building inspector and the housing inspector with regard to that properties?
I have been working with Kelly, Mr. Merrick, and I see Mr. Nichols is here. I don't know if he has comments that he wants to bring forward, or... And Kelly, you can maybe come up and direct this. It actually was going to be brought before the council at the last meeting, but it's my understanding that it was not brought then because there was a court proceeding pending between the owner and the tenant having to do with an eviction, and so that was held off. I think the most immediate concern is that somebody's living in there, and Kelly thinks it's a public health hazard, and there's a number of repairs that need to be made before it can be occupied. And so I think, Kelly, maybe you want to...
Yeah, basically we got called there because of a tenant that was staying in the trailer home for quite some time now. Called with concerns over moisture problems and other things with the trailer house. I think and what came out of it is maybe two different things, but a lot of things have been repaired on the trailer house with not our knowledge. A lot of the repairs that were completed were not done correctly, and there is some issues with the trailer that we need to follow compliances with in order to do the repairs. At this time, I believe that it needs attention, it needs to be addressed, but I don't think anybody should be living in the have to follow compliances to do the repairs on the trailer, but with the tenant in place, it was very tough to proceed with that repair. My concern is that and I don't believe someone should be living.
I think the plan, Kelly and I talked about this today, is to give the tenant a requirement that they have to be out of there within 7 days. And if they're not out of there within 7 days, then we would take legal action. And then in terms of the owner, we develop a timeline for them to make the repairs. Otherwise, if they're not made within a certain timeline, then the next step would be to come back to the council and seek an order like we have for the 5 that are pending in district court for the structures to be demolished.
Further questions or discussion on the part of the council? Any question?
Aye.
I would vote yes. Motion is carried. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, City Attorney. Item number 5 under new business is to approve Chief Maston's recommendation for the hire of Ms. Heather Olson as a part-time administrative assistant for the Police Department effective October the 1st, 2018. Council's pleasure with that recommendation?
Make a motion.
Motion by Councilor Kraus to approve the chief's recommendation for that hire.
I'll second.
Second by Councilor Droba. Discussion.
Just, you and I talked about what the hiring process was. Could you just outline that really quick for everybody?
Basically, we had the advertisement for the part-time position, which was approved. It was handled through the Workforce Center, I believe. We received, I want to say, 11 pretty qualified applicants. We received some applications there, and once it was closed and brought to me, the applications were then scored. The applications packages were scored on a 100-point basis. We offered interviews to the top 4 candidates. And of the top 4 candidates, Ms. Olson was the highest scoring, most qualified for the position.
And this has been a part-time position for the police department, and through the vacancy that's created by Don Kosak leaving.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Further questions or discussion? Question?
Aye.
I would vote yes. Motion is carried, and hiring of Heather Olson as a part-time administrative assistant is approved. Thank you. Item number 6 under new business is a resolution approving the International Falls Volunteer Firefighters to join the voluntary statewide lump sum volunteer firefighter retirement plan. Mr. Justin Chizik and Chief Manassa.
Thank you, Mayor. So, currently in the state of Minnesota, volunteer fire departments can run what's called a relief association, and that helps with retirement benefits for volunteers that may or may not get paid. It's an incentive for firemen to be firemen. Very recently, the state has started doing a state plan that's administered through PARA. All audits are done through the state auditor's office, and the investments are done through the State Board of Investment. So this is very similar to any retirement plan that's handled through PARA or Public Employees Retirement Account. Over the past couple of years, we've ran our relief association. We've had an independent investment company, and then we've also had audits done by our auditor that have become quite costly, as well as the forms and the requirements on the local jurisdiction to handle. It's become quite complicated. We're very concerned about the liabilities on our board and on our people handling that paperwork, and this seems like a very good option for us to pursue. Part of that in starting to do that is there's a few things that have to be done. We need to liquidate our assets through our investment company. That takes some time, so we have to have this initiated before the first of the year. It's a one-time enrollment per year, so at the beginning of every year is the enrollment period for that year. And then on the front end of it is a resolution from the fiduciary, which in this case is the City Council, to go ahead and approve that. So that being the first step, then we'd liquidate assets and then start our enrollment process with the state.
I move.
Motion by Councilor Jacksaw to adopt the resolution.
I'll second.
Second by Councilor Kraus. Questions or discussion?
May I?
Please.
Adam, so do the The current assets, are they going to move into para then, or what's the?
Yep, so the process that takes place, why this has to happen, they told us before Halloween was kind of the drop dead, but it can take up to 2 months to liquidate the assets and the investment. So we have a stock portfolio of different different assets, bonds, stocks, market funds, stuff like that. So it takes time to liquidate those assets. Once they're able to be transferred to the state, then they would get it in that form, in a cash out form. So then we would deposit that cash with the state into Para's account, and that would be the start of the process.
And anybody that's currently enrolled would get service credit, or how does that work?
Yep, so our bylaws technically stay into place. We have a couple things that are non-optional. One of the things that we're going to deal with locally, we had a 10-year vesting in our bylaws. For the most part, the bylaws stay intact. There are a few things that need to change. The state bylaws require a 5-year vesting. So that's one thing that'll have to change for us. When we make the transition over, we cannot give ourselves a raise. So typically every year we'd analyze what our funds are at and what our liabilities are, and we give ourselves raises accordingly for the fund. Once we transfer over to the state, we can't do that for 5 years. So we're going to hopefully be in front of the city council before the end of the year, getting one last bump up for a 5-year period, and we'll be locked in for that time. One other thing the state does not allow, we currently have a medical leave in our bylaws. The state does not honor medical leave. So one thing that they do differently is we can keep our relief board in place should we choose to do that. Most people do not. What happens is the fire chief in this case would submit a duty roster for the year, and that's the people eligible in the plan. So we can internally handle that should we choose to do it.
Other questions? So, Chief, if I may, does the 5-year vesting then change at all the dollars that are required to in the fund?
I don't believe so. I think where we enter the fund is where we stay, meaning we had one last group of firemen get on a year ago. I think they enter under our rules, but anybody hired after being in the fund fall under those rules, I believe.
Yeah.
Those that have been in the department less than 10 years, but more than 5 will automatically be vested then?
They could be. Either way, the money is figured as a liability. So each year there's a service roster done up, a schedule done up. So every person that's on that roster is considered a liability. So whether they're vested or not, the right amount of money is in place. They do that for what they call a catastrophic loss. So if we had a really bad day and we lost all our firemen in one fell swoop, the money should be there in place for every person. We have to be, by our bylaws, between 95 and 105% vested. We can enter the state plan down to 90%, but we don't intend on doing that.
And then presently the board has been working with a private investment firm to invest those funds that are collected from insurance monies that come to the fire department or come to the city to the fire department?
Correct, and they are a subsidiary of Wells Fargo, or they're attached to Wells Fargo. We've been very happy with their results. They've done a good job for us. It's just the process has become cumbersome, and well, none of us on the department are accountants, and we're a little worried.
And so then, when the funds get turned over to the Public Employees Retirement Association, does the state then back those? I mean, presently, if there was a shortfall, the city would have to maybe look at making some of that up.
That stays the same. That's why it requires your authorization to go to the state plan, but the city and the city council remains a fiduciary on that. So in the future, after our 5-year entry, let's call it, or our entry, and we decide to go for a raise, it still needs to be approved by the city council because you're still the fiduciary in that aspect. So that portion of it does not change.
So other than the advantage of having the State Board of Investment investing those funds for you, are there any other advantages to the firefighters?
There's a lot.
Or the city?
I'm gonna let Justin talk about it. Part of it has to do with our investment costs and our auditing costs.
Yeah, so the investment, so we pay Par McKnight a certain percentage of the investment, and it's to the tune of $15,000-ish a year. The state's fees are gonna be closer to like $800 a year, so it's a pretty substantial amount of, I mean, you can imagine if you're putting that much more money in your 401k every year, it's end up with us having a lot more money. On top of that, we would no longer need the accountant firm to do that work as well, which is another,
I think 12 this year, or was it more
it's
than
usually
that?
around 6,000 for them.
That's
So it's-
that's what I recall, 6,000 or 7,000 to
yeah,
do
so when
that.
you add the two up, it's a lot
Still
of
a
money that
significant
we get to
payout.
invest instead of having to pay accountants and investors for it. So.
One thing that I think really sold this for us in the last month, we had a payout of what's called one of our deferred members, so after they retire, they cannot receive their money until they reach 50 years old. We had a person attain the age of 50 years old this summer. We contacted the investment company and the auditing company. We were told what to pay out that person. The figure was incorrect. So when we got back from the state, we had overpaid the person, which is not a big deal on us. It was $89, but that affected what the state supplement is. So the state overpaid that person $8, I think it was. We had a very limited amount of time to get our $8 down to the state and make them whole again, and it jeopardized our $60,000 supplemental payment for the year. So these are the kind of mistakes that weren't really anything to do with any of our board, but it was something that greatly affected our membership, and that's the situations we don't want to be in.
Very good. Further questions or discussion on the part of the council?
Mayor, I'd just
Please,
point out that-
City Administrator?
Thank you. I just point out that the assets from our Relief Association have to be transferred to the investment fund of the investment not later than November 30th. This is approved by the council, then the Relief Association will have representatives to make sure that that transfer.
The audit report, the last one, we do show adequate funding.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact number. It was 100 and something.
113% funded, I think.
Yeah.
What we found with the current auditor we use is they do provide a percent funded, but it doesn't necessarily, there's two different ways to figure that. Our old auditor, Miller McDonald, had it figured out a different way, so that was a true number. This one we found to be off a couple percent, but we're at 113% by their report. We figure we're easily 110% funded. There's just a minor calculation difference in the way it's figured.
All right, further questions or discussion? Thank you. Question on the place to the council?
Aye.
I would vote yes. Motion is carried and resolution is adopted, approving the, joining the voluntary statewide lump sum firefighter retirement plan. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Item number 7 is to approve the Northeast Minnesota Emergency Communications Board Regional Advisory Committee bylaws and authorizing necessary signatures. Chief Manassa.
Yeah, so we are part of the Emergency Communications Board, and I believe Councilor Droba is the representative for the city. I am the alternate on that. They did send out, so being part of that regional board, we have to sign on as a city and approve their bylaws with authorized signatures. And simply put, they sent us a copy of the bylaws. I believe Ken reviewed them and requesting signatures to go on those.
Pretty perfunctory. I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion by Councilor Jacksaw to approve the bylaws.
I'll second.
second by Councillor Droba. Discussion on the motion or the bylaws of the Northeast Minnesota Emergency Communications Board? Hearing none, question? I would vote yes. Motion is carried. Bylaws are approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 8 under new business is to consider approval of the redevelopment agreement for demolition of the TP Motel. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've had discussions with the potential buyer of the site, as well as discussions with the current owner, and the prospective buyer does not want to enter into a development agreement. They're hoping to just proceed under our existing demolition policies for a removal, but there's their situation, their circumstances because of the fire are a little different than any that we've done in the past, and so I'm hopeful that we'll be able to work through something that allows the new owner to come in and want to replace the existing structure with a new structure, but we're not there yet, so we're still in the discussion phase, so there isn't anything for the council to take action on now. I know that I think City Administrator Mr. Anderson has had some discussions with a potential buyer as well, and we're hoping to work through those things.
Councillor Droba.
In the event that we don't get a redevelopment agreement with the potential buyers of the TP, is there any way that we can still deal with the property and then assess that because of the hazardous conditions to the current owner? They have received insurance money, so any potential sale moving forward where the city ends up being liable for taking care of that building is unfair to the citizens of International Falls. And my reasoning is this: they had the fire, they collected the insurance money. I don't care if they sell it for $800. They're making more money on top of the money that they made, and then they give a liability to the city of somewhere between a minimum of $20,000 to remove that building, and it could be anywhere to $80,000 that the taxpayers pay to remove that building. Is there any way that we can, if this deal doesn't go through with the potential buyers of the TP, still effectively tear down the building or take care of it and assess those fees onto the current owner, and then if they sell it down the road, at least the new owner would know that that's going to be assessed on the property taxes when the sale goes through?
I think potentially, but I don't have enough facts to give you the definitive answer on that right now. But I mean, the question becomes, where does this fit in our current commercial demolition program? We're trying to come up with something. I think everybody wants to be gone and something new to take its place, but not at great expense to the city. So what we're trying to do is come up with something that everybody's comfortable with, and we're working on it, but we're not there yet.
I just have to think that it's been a year. In fact, the calendar, it was a year 2 days ago that it burned down, and there has to be some form of a time frame that we can come up with in anything we do moving forward on these ordinances that says if you have a burned building, you have 6 months to either correct it or fix it, or we tear it down at your expense. I think we need to have something in place that says that, and We have 2 on the main street, and I had a burned building across the street from my house for a year and a half. We have one on 11th Street right now, which is where we had a fire, I don't know, probably 6 months ago. I'm not certain on the time frame. But again, if we don't do anything about these burned houses, they're just sitting there, these burned properties, there has to be something we can do to put it back onto the homeowner or business owner or property owner, I guess that's the word I'm looking for. And if we have to demolish it, at least we get the money back when it sells, or when it goes tax forfeit, or however it ends up going. We have to be able to do something.
I think that's, one of the reasons we need to address that in the new ordinance that we're considering.
And if I understand it correctly, you're correct in saying that we have not dealt with this kind of a situation previously in taking down a commercial structure, and part of it is that the city landfill, we are not allowed to place burned material in the city. We have to take it to an approved or certified landfill, which is more expensive, going to be more, or could be more expensive for the city.
Well, that's correct. The county has a landfill that it could go to, but there would be expense, and that's one of the things we're discussing is having the property owner bear that expense and the city not bear that expense, and so we're trying to come up with all the terms that we can put in this, and complicated.
What happened when Ace Hardware broke down? Remember?
That's a classic answer right there.
Well, I've just, we do have precedents here.
There was a lot that took place, but I don't remember all the specifics off the top of my head. But that actually occurred relatively quickly with the Ace Hardware. There was some insurance there, and the tear down of that building, and it was all worked through together.
I did think that cost the city something, if I recall. It did, but I don't, it's been a while.
Commissioner Ted, would you care to come up and speak to this?
Well, I do believe the Ace Hardware, the only difference with the Ace Hardware was there.
It wasn't enough, okay.
But we also did get special weight in BCA to put the burnt material. Allowance for that.
I think we were net loss on that, though, weren't we?
Yeah. It was a hazard.
Yeah, we had to do it. We were. Yeah.
However, the city did receive some funds for that.
I believe so.
So was that was a voluntary act on the part of the owners to relinquish the insurance funds to the city?
We made an agreement. We negotiated.
So I think, Councilor Droba, you're speaking to the present owner of the TP and also to the potential future owners.
Well, I don't think it's fair to residents of International Falls for us to tear down this for any potential buyer. We're going to improve the property by tearing down that building, and then they have the option of selling the property at a windfall to them, or they get a nice property where they can build a building. I'm okay with doing it if they're going to build and improve on that. But if we're improving the property so that someone else can make $1, I'm not okay with that. And I think it makes more sense for us to make a deal or a negotiation with the current owner who has received insurance money on that, rather than make it a liability for the city for the next owners. It just seems like that's the route we should be doing, and I don't feel good about the new owners having to deal with this as the first thing for that building. I don't care how much they buy the building for, it's a liability for us. If they're buying it with an agreement that says that we're going to be the ones that tear it down, and they get to recoup the cost on whatever they sell it for, or, unless they put in an agreement that says, if you guys tear it down, I'm gonna build a X amount of building on there, and I'm gonna improve on the corridor, I'm not okay with it. I really think we need to go for the current owner of the building who has received the insurance money.
And there you have my sentiment. I agree with you on that, so there you have some direction on these negotiations. I mean, that's...
Well, we're looking for two primary moves here. One, we want the property cleaned up, but secondly, we want to try to encourage reinvestment.
Right.
Thirdly, we want to do it with no cost to the taxpayer. That's the big thing. I mean, I don't think that's right at all. I agree with Harley. It's totally out of whack that city taxpayers are going to have to pay to demolish that building and somebody else is going to benefit by it. I don't agree to that one bit.
Especially considering they've been paid for it.
Right.
I guess you have our sentiments here.
You have a tough task ahead of you. Thank you.
Negotiate well, my friend.
Mayor,
That actually strengthens your hand now. You've got...
I just wanted to make the point that my understanding is that there's a purchase agreement on the property and there's, certain terms that may be affected. So if in the city attorney's conversations with the prospective buyer and the current owner necessitated, I am assuming that the council would be open to having a special meeting to move forward with a common agreement or other decisions that would need to be made to move forward and try and do so.
Have that consensus?
Very good. And also for the record, the council has a committee of the whole meeting on October 8th, so I will work with the city attorney to try and make sure if there's any outstanding issues that need to be resolved and require city council action, perhaps we could schedule a special meeting on that date.
When are we meeting on the 8th?
2 o'clock.
Commissioner Ted Broca.
Another thing to keep in mind.
A question, Commissioner, do we have any other structures that we're going to be removing in the next week or two?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Well, I will get whatever we're able to put together to you on October 8th at the Committee of the Whole meeting.
I'm not certain that I know what action we would need tonight, other than I
don't think any action. I understand. I think the feeling, the sense of the council, and I'll try to negotiate that to the best of my ability, and I'll report back prior to the 8th as to and anything that I negotiate subject to approval by the council. So I'm not going to be binding the city to anything other than bringing something to you to consider.
Thank you. All right, we'll move to item number 9 under new business, and that's to set a public hearing to consider the annexation of property into the City of International Falls. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. We're not able, I don't think we're able to set a date yet for a public hearing. There's 2 ways we can do this from this point forward. One is what's called orderly annexation, and the other is by petition. There's there's an Office of Municipal Boundary Adjustments that's within the hearing examiner, the state hearing examiner's office. I'm been discussions with that office to try to determine which of these two processes is the best to go down. And it depends somewhat on the nature of the properties that we're going to annex, and if we are going to attempt to include any properties where the property owners are not asking us to annex them. And there are hearings that are required through both processes, but the timeframes are a little bit different. And so I hope at the next meeting to be able to come back and report what the recommendation is as to the best way to proceed, and it'll involve some, since these properties are currently in the county, it's going to require, in either instance, involvement of the county as part of the process, because they would be leaving the county's tax rolls and coming under the city's tax rolls. So I hope to have more definitive suggestions at the next council meeting.
Not understanding.
Yeah, I don't understand that either.
They wouldn't be leaving the county tax rolls.
Well, they'd be added to the city. I mean, the disposition of their taxes is going to be different, whether they're in the city or not. I mean, it's going to change the taxes and where to go. But any time we are taking in property that's outside the city, that's not owned by the city, involves county and input from the county. They don't necessarily have veto power, but there are discussions and process that needs to go through.
Those parcels would still be paying their county taxes at the same rate as they do today, and then they would be paying their city taxes on top of that, correct? Yeah, it's not in lieu of. Okay, just wanted to make sure that was.
Okay, further questions on the part of the council, but this time you'll have a recommendation at a future meeting here.
I hope to have it at the next meeting. I've had some preliminary discussions with the office and just need more time to work through the details with.
Very good. Thank you. Nothing further there. We'll move to item 10 under new business, and that's considered a resolution proposed by the City of International Falls regarding the ownership of a sewer line that serves as a primary collector and interceptor carrying wastewater, proposed for adoption by the North Couchiching Area Sanitary District Board of Directors. There was, in the previous resolution that we had before the council, there was items in there that included some catch basin or some areas that were owned by the North Couch, but primarily served East Couchiching and Rainier. And there was some objection by members to having that in, and so we have taken those items out of the resolution at this time and focused this resolution only to the sewer line that serves primarily the City of International Falls, but does carry sewage through from the ponds and from Rainier and East Couchiching. And as you can see in the be it further resolved, the city would not charge or expect any compensation from those entities for any sewage that would flow through that sewer line. What we're primarily concerned about is having the 26 lines that enter into this line that are serving citizens of International Falls, and wanting to make sure that we're not going to have any problems with that line backing up and causing issues for citizens of International Falls. The city has been maintaining that line for 35 years, and we would expect to continue that process for the next many, many years. So your approval of this resolution to go to the North Cooch Sanitary District is requested.
So moved.
Motion by Councillor Droba.
Second.
Second by Councillor Briggs. Discussion on the motion or the resolution.
Okay, so I just want to ask the question, were these changes just made by us as a city, or were these somewhat negotiated with the sewer board or the North Cooch Area Sanitary District Director, or is this just our outline that we're giving them to make a decision on?
There was concerns on the part of some of those representing International Falls and other members of the board of the North Coochiching, and they were the ones that raised the questions, and that's why it was revised for them. But it has not included any negotiations or discussions with the North Coochiching Executive Director.
So the concern that I see that was in here that was probably the strongest that I received feedback on was the potential of the city charging to use that line. So I like that the way that the wording is in here to fix that particular problem that was with it. So I'm okay with sending it over there. Ultimately, it still goes to the board to decide whether they like it or not.
I have a question, though.
Please.
And why would we not charge?
Well, because it's presently part of the North Cooch Sanitary District, their line, and so it serves as a interceptor in collecting sewage from the ponds or from East Cooch and Rainier. The amount of sewage that's coming through there is a small percentage compared to what goes through for the city of International Falls. So it's not that it's de minimis, but it certainly isn't by far the majority coming from somewhere else.
Well, and part of it too is if we don't charge, if we put that in there, right now that might alleviate one of the concerns because the city wants to retain or wants to have the ownership according to the paperwork that the North Cooch Sanitary District, they say they own it. So this is somewhat a negotiation on we won't charge, we haven't charged in the past. For the last 35 years, we've maintained it even though they've owned it. So we're just trying to put it into words to continue what we've done.
Okay. Right. We've maintained it, we have the equipment and the personnel to do it. If it goes the other route, now they got to go probably buy equipment, probably hire other additional people, so it'd be more of a cost
to them, which is us.
Right.
Or they could
Of which
pay
we
us.
pay 88% of.
Right.
So
Well, that, they could pay us too, heaven forbid.
But then they would raise their rates because they're paying us.
We only pay 88% of those. But, okay. I won't, it's fine. It's fine, we'll just go ahead.
all right, further questions or discussion? Question?
Aye.
I would vote yes. Motion is carried, and the resolution is approved. Thank you. Item number 11, under new business, to consider the proposal for Phase 2 study of the Fire Rescue EMS Department by consultant Mike Metro, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've had some conversations, and the council had previously approved contract with Mr. Metro to conduct a financial analysis of the ambulance operations as part of a Phase 1 study. He completed that work, and we reviewed it on a couple of occasions with the Human Resources Committee. Since he's completed that work, he's looking for guidance from the city as to how to move forward with Phase 2. We've had conversations with him, and I've amended his original agreement to include Phase 2 work, which will involve him coming to the city. Right now, he's anticipating he'd be here for about 4 days, the week of October 28th. He's laid out a scope of work, which is an attachment to the agreement in your packet. His not-to-exceed fee would be as high as $12,000 for Phase 2, and then And the city would be requested to pay for his out-of-pocket travel expenses, which would be for lodging and then airline travel and any ground travel that he'll have while he's here. We had a meeting this afternoon, and I think without any question, the consensus of the Human Resources was the department head and myself is to have the city council approve the agreement and move forward. We're hopeful to have his report if you do choose to move forward with the agreement. He's indicated it would be an aggressive schedule, but he'd like to have it done and available for us in draft form for sure December 12th. And we'd like to have some recommendations coming forward after December 12th and before December 17th, which is the last meeting that this city council will have this year. Maybe move forward and approve whatever recommendations come out of phase 2. So asking for council approval of the phase 2 agreement. That would again be a ultimate fee to Mr. Mike Metro for a fee not to exceed $12,000, and then any additional travel and lodging expenses would be added on top of it.
As chair of the Human Resource Committee who's reviewed this agreement, I'll make the motion that we move forward and hire the consultant.
Councillor Jackson moves to approve the study and by consultant Mike Metro, second by Councillor Briggs, at a cost not to exceed $12,000.
That doesn't include travel.
Okay. Including travel?
Not including travel.
Including travel is the motion.
Is it?
Well, the motion is to
12,000
include
plus
12,000 plus. Yes, please. And then and if I understand, the primary focus is in that background under the second paragraph. That's to maintain service levels, stabilize or reduce operational costs, and improve revenues. Is that the primary focus,
Yes.
members of the committee and city administrator?
That would be the goal for that outcome. Yeah, he's outlined what the specific work that he's going to do in the phase 2. Last couple pages of the packet.
Right. Further questions or discussion? Councillor Droba.
So I'm looking at the last page in here, and one of the things is we're gonna come up with a plan to market new transportation fees, develop partnerships with hospitals. The stuff that we did in phase 1? I thought in phase 1 we set new rates for our ambulance, and that's something that the HR's already looked at.
Phase 1 was basically got into the financial situation so far as breaking it down and why we're somewhat running in a deficit, so to speak, or trying to figure that out. Where this phase 2 is going to get more into the operational aspect of how we run the ambulance service.
We're pretty much settled on the fees because we've discussed that at length. In fact, we could even move forward sooner than the end of the year. So I think the fee part we've covered, don't you think, Councillor?
Well, that's what basically that phase 1 got into the fee schedule and on your runs with Medicare and other reimbursables and everything else, how you get paid back. So
I think that when you set fees, it has an impact on your write-offs and some of your other arrangements, so that it's not, you can't really consider fees separately. That once we agree to set the fees, this will impact the second phase as well, because it will change certain computations there too.
Okay,
So I think that's what you're asking, right?
Somewhat. So then my follow-up question is, if we do this and we're going to go aggressive and we're going to try to have it done by December 12th, if we do this, are we going to be able to implement these changes effective January 1st as we go into the next year?
I wish.
Are we going to have budget implications based off of this? I mean, if we're hemorrhaging out of that account, That was not a pun necessary, but we are.
At this point, that account does not affect our levy?
It doesn't affect our levy, but it affects the city if we're losing $200,000.
Ultimately, it will affect our levy, but, you know, if we don't do something. But
So, and that's my concern. What is the ultimately time frame on this? If we did phase 1, now we're working on phase 2, we should get the information by December 12th. What is the implementation that we do past that? I mean, where...
on an optimistic timeline, I would look to approving the recommendations from the HR committee after we receive the report as to what steps we should take. And that then, according to the city administrator at our committee meeting today, he thought realistically it would be not until the end of January that we could conceivably be ready to implement, because of whatever the recommendations are. They may impact our union contracts. We don't know exactly what the outcome, that the fallout is going to be from these recommendations yet. So the time frame can't really be determined, but you thought the end of January was...
The administrator, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. I think to answer specifically Councilor Groba's question is that the committee's reviewed phase 1. The committee is comfortable and has actually made a recommendation on some fee increases. However, based on your astute observation of the scope of work here, he has talked about the plan, or developed the elements of a plan to market the new transport fees. I want to have a conversation with him about what he sees as necessary to market with the proposed plans. But clearly we want to and need to increase the fees and have the structure financially paying the ambulance, because right now we're losing some money. So there's also questions though about the schedule of our crews, and we're working on a trial schedule period right now where we're working outside the established schedule that's in the contract that we have with the labor union. There's been a temporary 90-day period where we're trying something experimentally. We want to extend that to the end of January to address Councilor Jacksaw's issues, is that allow Mr. Metro to complete his recommendations, which we anticipate by having in mid-December, and then not knowing what those recommendations are, we want to have roughly a 6-week period after the City Council's meeting on December 17th to actually implement some of those recommendations. If it involves more scheduling changes or shift changes or changing staffing within the existing shifts, I'm not sure what that's going to look like, but we're hoping that it's going to improve our efficiencies, make us more financially solvent, and for sure have our revenues at least meet, if not, our expenses. And right now they're not exceeding our expenses, so that's why we need to have this analysis to look at our operational system, see how we can improve efficiencies, and at the same time look at our rate structure, which is what he did in phase 1. So I'm actually envisioning, and I did talk with the committee today, is that it probably makes more sense to wait before we actually roll out the new fees so we can see, try and talk with our other stakeholders, which would be Rainy Lake Medical Center, Mesacha Health, Sanford, and other places where we do significant transfers, so that, and our consulting billing agency, so that we can make sure that we bring everybody into the picture, we understand what the implications and what we have to do from an administrative standpoint to actually implement and roll out these new fees. So now I think in our conversations after this meeting and what we've talked about earlier today, if he says that we can move forward with his recommendations on a fee system now, and then we can still work about how do we work with our other stakeholders between now and December 12th, I would like to do that because we get more money coming in sooner. But right now, I think we want to wait and see what his recommendation is. The proposal involved fee increases for basic life support services, our advanced life support services, and some of our transport fees. An increase for
Any further question or discussion? Chief, did you have any points that you wanted to make with regard to this recommendation?
I think Administrator Anderson.
Thank you. Questions on discussion on the part of the council? And the payment of the 12,000 plus expenses would be from the ambulance department budget.
Yes.
Further questions or discussion? The chair would then place the question.
Aye? No.
Aye.
And I would vote yes. Motion is carried, and approval is given to accept the proposal of Phase 2. Thank you. Item number 12 is an addition to the agenda, and that's to approve the 2019 group renewal and rate information from the Northeast Minnesota Healthcare Consortium and Service Cooperative on the Blue Cross Blue Shield rates. City Administrator?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We work with the Northeast Service Cooperative and Blue Cross Blue Shield on providing health insurance for some of our retired personnel. There's only one active employee that's on this particular plan right now. This is an annual renewal. There's an increase in rates effective January 1st of 2019. So for single coverage, the rate goes from $7.50 up to $878.50. For family coverage, it goes from $2,018 per month up to $2,195.50 per month. And we need to have that. This would be an annual renewal. This is a smaller increase than it was last year, and we just need the council's approval for this. And I believe Blue Cross Blue Shield really needs this by the middle of this month. So.
I'll move.
Motion by Councillor Jacksaw to approve the renewal and rate information.
I'll second.
Second by Councillor Kraus. Questions or discussion? Hearing none?
Built into our budget, by the way, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, just, I was looking at you.
I picked up on that.
It's built into our budget.
No further questions or discussion? Question?
Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
I would vote yes. Motion was carried, and renewal and rate information is approved. Thank you. Item number 13 under new business is to consent to the mayor's appointment of Joe Kraus to the Legislation and Land Use Committee of the City Council. Motion by Councillor Jacksaw.
Second.
Second by Councillor Droba. Discussion? Question?
Aye?
Aye.
I'll abstain.
Aye.
I would vote yes, there being 4-4 and 1 abstention. Motion is carried, and the appointment is approved. Thank you. Any other new business?
I have some issues that I would like to see addressed.
Under new business or under?
Under new business.
Under
I don't
committees
have
or?
a specific piece of action to request, but I do have some issues. So where would you like me to have those? Issues.
If you want to have issues, you can have them now.
Hospital?
That was not phrased properly. Anyway, I had a complaint that's concerning because it goes to safety. What are the rules for four-wheelers in town? How can they drive on city streets?
Chief Maston, please.
No, four-wheelers can't drive on city streets.
Okay.
Now, with
But
that said-
snowmobiles
With that said, there's a different class of the side-by-sides can drive on city streets.
Okay.
The bigger side-by-sides, I have class. That's what it is. Your regular four-wheeler or three-wheeler, bikes and things of that nature are not allowed on our streets.
But snowmobiles are?
Yes, they are.
And under what sense of logic do we do that?
That's above me.
That's an ordinance that we passed.
I believe that the snowmobiles may be an exception in our ordinance, so it's specifically stated, I believe.
Anyway, it just, my reaction was when I was told this doesn't make any sense. But, you know, you to allow snowmobiles on the street and not four-wheelers, but.
May I?
Go ahead.
No.
Well, no, let me explain my issue first. The four-wheelers are on people's frontage between the curb and the yard. They're on that, in that area than driving rather than on the street. This particular household's grandson almost got hit by a four-wheeler because the four-wheeler was basically right on the edge of their yard, right? So we have four-wheelers driving along lawn and curb, and so it seems to me that, and yet we allow snowmobiles on the street. So why wouldn't we just allow the four-wheelers on the street if we're going to allow snowmobiles on the street? I guess it's an ordinance question. It doesn't make any sense to me, but, you know, it's something that we need to look at in our ordinances to try to come up with. I mean, why would we allow snowmobiles and not four-wheelers? Explain that to me.
Mayor, if I could just offer a comment. I believe, and I haven't looked at this for some time, which would be nice to have a little advance notice so we can look at the statutes beforehand too, but I'm fairly certain that snowmobiles are limited to traveling on the road directly to a trail from their house. So it's not like you can just drive wherever you want on a snowmobile. I mean, I could be on a Sherwood if I live out on South Falls. I mean, it's to get directly to a trail.
That's true, the four-wheelers too, though, as far as, yeah.
And the state had changed the law, I want to say 2 years ago, to make it legal for a side-by-side to be on the roadways. And those side-by-sides have lights, they have seat belts, usually they have roll bars and stuff so they're more safe. Whereas your traditional four-wheeler that's not that class 3 or however it's referenced, not have seat belts, and on the legislature just recently made a change for those off-highway vehicles.
Okay.
May I? And there are corridors in International Falls where snowmobiles aren't allowed. You can't ride a snowmobile down 4th Street. You can't ride a snowmobile down 53. You can't ride a snowmobile down 11th Street. You can't ride it down 9th Avenue. There are places in town where a snowmobile isn't allowed. And I think it goes back to it's more in alignment with what how the state looks at snowmobiles. There are tens of thousands of miles of groomed snowmobile trails throughout the state, and the state prides itself on being a mecca for people to come and snowmobile. There's a lot of tourism that goes with it. Unfortunately, in our area, we don't have the four-wheeler trails like it is like the snowmobile, so they look at it as an economic thing to get to their hotels. Typically, they're in hotels or other places they're trying to get to.
Yeah, I understand that we snowmobiling, but I guess my issue ultimately is, how is it wise for us to have, if we do have the ordinance, allow four-wheelers to be tooling down along the yards of people?
We don't.
We don't allow that?
They're trespassing. They can't drive their four-wheeler across.
Well, it isn't, it's really on the frontage piece, so maybe isn't their property, but it's right adjacent to their property?
They don't have
They don't have the right. They're in violation.
Yeah.
See, I was told that.
Whether they're in the street, they can't be, in the right 5 feet off the street in the right of way on an ATV. That's illegal.
Okay, well then I'll tell my constituents.
They need to transport that ATV out to a trail or their own property.
I was told that it was legal when she had
But the question is then, what about county roads? Like 11th Street's technically a county road, which maintains a right-of-way. So
I'm talking 20th Street here.
that's a county road. It maintains a right-of-way. So they can ride in the right-of-way of a county or a state.
A county road.
Which
not
that is.
on city streets that wouldn't be a county road. So I mean, there's probably some exceptions.
All right,
And ironically, it's probably the same place where snowmobiles can't go, that ATVs would go along the right of way.
Right, and this is why. So can the city put up ordinances along county roads within the city limits to restrict four-wheelers?
Well, I think the state would control, the state.
We don't have the ability to do that?
I don't know, but I would suspect that the county and the state would control that.
Well, my answer to my constituent is, sorry, we can't do anything. What can we, because only the state and the county control that, I guess.
If they're on a county road.
But you did say 20th Street.
20th
which isn't.
Street.
I was thinking 17th is, 20th Street is not, so they are.
It's not a county?
Not that I'm aware of.
I think it is.
Is it?
Yes,
It is now with the
Okay.
connection to
With the connection?
107
Probably all the way to Shannon's then, or bus garage somewhere in there?
or to 53.
Stops at 53, at the hilltop there? Okay, so it would be.
All right, I guess the other thing would be, and to me this is a safety hazard, but if I were this person, I would put a fence up. And what would happen is somebody would hit that fence.
Well, you can't put a fence up in the right.
In the right of way.
But I know that. I realize that. I know you think I'm stupid, but I'm not. Well, he's laughing.
Well, no, I'm only laughing because you can't ride in there, you can't stop it. It's just kind of no man's land.
I'm not asking whether you can put a fence in the right of way.
No, that's not what I'm laughing at. I'm laughing at how ridiculous the entire thing ends up being. You can't put up a fence. You can't stop them from going in there. It is your property. The whole thing, it's just a crazy nuance to the way that it is.
If they do put up a fence, it will be right on, right, to separate.
the right of way.
But it's dangerous, because at night you've got, the chances of somebody hitting that fence coming in would be, anyways. Do four-wheelers have lights?
Yes.
They do? Okay, well, anyway, what my thing here is, how do we resolve this issue? If it's a county road, it's unresolvable for us.
Well, they could put up a fence around their own property, and that way no one could go into outside the right of way so that they are not going into the right of way.
I can't tell them that. These are the Ridgeway people, by the way. Okay, well, I do have some other issues, but I guess we're going to have a committee of the whole on infrastructure, right? That's scheduled for October 8th. I think that was at the top of it, because I have some other infrastructure issues. But that one it's a safety issue when a grandson almost gets killed by a four-wheeler. I mean, it gets my attention,
All right, further, under new business? We'll move to the reports of boards, committees, and department heads. City Administrator?
Just one point I would bring up, Mr. Mayor, for the vote tonight on the claims. Councilor Briggs abstained on approval of Briggs' bundles, he indicated to me, so I just want to make that of record. We did talk about the committee of the whole meeting at 2 o'clock on Monday, October 8th. I think we want to have a conversation about perhaps we can address some of the questions in the process that city attorney had brought up on annexation, and I'll have some other business in addition to the public items. So I just wanted to also aware of that. I don't have anything else.
Thank you. City Attorney?
Nothing further.
Thank you. Chief Maston?
Nothing.
Thank you. Chief Manassa?
The only thing I'd like to as asked about the gas main infrastructure, I did get in contact with Scott Aldina, Minnesota Energies. He talked to his higher-ups within the company. They've had a lot of requests for similar reports, so they're going to generate something at their level out of Illinois. He was not able to be. It was not done before this meeting, but I would anticipate it by the next council meeting.
Very good. Thank you for following up on that. Let's see. Building Inspector Myers, anything further?
Good, thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to reports of the mayor, council committees, boards, and commissions.
Well, garbage pickup, you want to, or
Yes, please.
clean up? Okay, I want to thank Councilor Kraus, candidate Walt Bowler, correct? Candidate Roger Jackson is here, and Leon, I thought he left already. Leon was here earlier tonight, but we had 4 candidates for our council present that day working on the cleanup. Once again, Friends came through for us. They've got such graciousness and they absorbed the cost of the first dump truck. We only had one. And they donated their time as well. Wayne Fuller from the county, we couldn't do it without him either. And the pickup crew, which was Larry Davison and my husband, they worked to pick up at people's homes. That happened. And the several students were there from the student council. And in addition, we had Janelle Feller from Friends Against Abuse. I think I caught everybody. The school district, of course, provides the parking lot, and so we had a lot of cooperation. My recommendation for next, it was well worth our resources. We did collect a full garbage truck. We did collect a whole pile full of appliances, and a roll-off of demolition. We didn't get that much in batteries this time, or tires, but we had a whole roll-off of demolition stuff, which was, brush would be nice. We got to figure out how to do that next year. A lot of thank yous, by the way. A lot of thank yous to the council from the people who made use of that.
So just with the conversation that we had earlier tonight with, we have people in our community that are willing to pitch in and help. Maybe next year when we do the community cleanup, that can be a shout out to our community to have them come out, and maybe some of these properties that are in disarray. I mean, we didn't go and grab the garbage out of their yards, but maybe that's the time where some of our citizens can go to their neighbors and say, we see you have a problem here, we're willing to help. And maybe that's a way that we can get some of these other blighted areas cleaned up with the help and assistance of people in our community that say they want to help. And I think Gary made a really good point. He wasn't here just to complain. He legitimately wants to help and be part of the process to clean it up, and maybe that's a way we can utilize them.
And Councilor Droba, that was our vision to begin with, was that we would encourage, it's called neighborhood, so we were hoping that we'd get some of this working along in the block between people to help each other. At one year, I actually went and talked to people that Kelly provided me with names who needed help, and I didn't think I had any takers from that group, unfortunately. You give it to free, what more can you do, right?
Well, you can have people pull it out of their yards. I mean, that's really the only other step.
We did do that, and it really didn't work well, but I do, that isn't to say we give up.
No, I get you.
Because it's a period of, you need a period of exposure and education, and then it catches. I believe it'll catch.
I do too.
Thank you for your observation.
City Administrator, please.
Thank you. Just a quick comment. We had our second Blight Forum meeting on Friday last week, and I just wanted Councilor Jackson to know that there was other local government entities there, and they were very complimentary of our neighborhood cleanup initiative, and thank you for that because this was part of brainchild with the residential and advisory committee to undertake that we've had with it, and I just wanted.
Thank you. It's nice to know you made some small contribution in some way. I do think that the Residential and Housing Building Advisory Committee has been rather dormant because we've been waiting for that study. But once we have that study, I'm hoping to re-engage that committee because it's going to take donated time and some continual effort to translate the study into grant opportunities. Eventually it'll mean grant writing, at some point. Correct. So that's what I foresee for the Building and Housing and Commercial Advisory Committee, that they actually be involved with some of that effort to develop through grant writing efforts.
And we will hear a preliminary report on that October 15th, I believe is the date, which is 2 weeks from today, that we will hear a preliminary report on that housing study.
Yeah, right. I look forward to that. I was out in the community doing canvassing this weekend and saw once again, revisited some of the blight, and it's heartbreaking. We can do better. you know.
We need a true cultural shift here, no doubt about that. Thank you for your leadership, Councillor Jacksaw, on having that community cleanup. They were great last year, and sounds like it was very successful again this year. Further under council committees, boards, and commissions. To the city administrator's point on the blight meeting, thank you to Chief Maston, Chief Manassa, City Attorney Shermoen, and Building Inspector Myers for also being there. Thought it was a good meeting. Hopefully we can do some cooperative work with the City of Rainier and hopefully with the two of us maybe bring the county into some of the unorganized area. So more to come on that. If there's nothing further under boards and commissions, we move to the audience. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to make any comments to the council at this time? If not, thank you, and we have correspondence there, and then reminders. The Committee of the Whole meeting again is October 8th at 2 p.m. The public information meeting on the proposed local option sales and use tax is Monday evening, October the 8th at 7 p.m. here in the council chambers. The next regular city council meeting is Monday, October 15 at 4:30 p.m. If there's nothing further to come before the council at this time, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you.